Let's walk through the scenario where a new machine joins a LAN and where that LAN corresponds to a subnet. So here I have my new machine. It has some MAC address that's built into the machine, so it knows it when it gets started. And it enters this LAN/subnet, and so it wants an IP address, so it sends these discovery packets at the network layer, which need to correspond to some discovery frame at the link layer. So this Ethernet frame's header is going to identify the source of the frame because the machine knows it, and then it's going to broadcast to everything on the same LAN. One of the nodes that receives this broadcast is going to be the router, and so the router is going to participate in DHCP and, give that new machine an IP address. So at this point, the machine knows its MAC and it's got an IP address. It also knows the router's IP address, but when it's sending packets outside the network, packets go through the router, but those packets are going to be addressed to further out. What this machine needs locally is the router's MAC address, and it doesn't yet know any of the MAC addresses on the network in principle. Now, it could, to send a message to the router with a packet that's being sent externally, just broadcast link layer frames, and the router will pick up the ones that make sense for it to send as packets outside the network. But this is too noisy. Everything sent over this link is going to be seen and broadcast to the other machines. If those frames are addressed to a particular MAC, then the other machines at a low level, before even bothering the operating system, can just throw away frames that are not intended for that machine. So we want to send packets meant to be delivered out to the wider network directly to the router at the link layer. So this machine is going to discover the router's MAC address by sending out an ARP request. It's going to give its own MAC address as the source of this frame. It's still going to broadcast for a while, but this broadcast is in the interest of doing fewer broadcasts going forward. And in this broadcast message, it says, okay, I know the router's address from DHCP is 155.98.68.1. Tell me the MAC address associated with that. This message gets broadcast, and the router receives that, and it says, oh, I am that address. And so it sets its own source MAC address in the frame header. That frame goes out over the link layer medium. These other machines who are not that destination address can quickly ignore this frame if it doesn't provide them useful information. But the machine down here that was interested in the answer can remember from now on that 155.98.68.1 is the source address here. And so it puts that in a table that it keeps, and anytime it wants to send packets out at the network layer, then it knows it wants to go through a router, and it knows the router's MAC address, and so the frames can be addressed to that router. So here we are sending an HTTP request to some remote server. At the link layer is coming from this machine going to the router, and then the router will take that packet, strip off the link layer header, and put on a new one that's suitable for sending out the other end to that link to get it to the destination server. Meanwhile, machines are accumulating these tables mapping IP addresses to MACs. If you're interested to see that table, you can use the ARP command. So if I use ARP-A, then I see on my local network, these are different IP addresses on my subnet here, my local network, but they're all at Ethernet layer MACs that my machine can reach directly, can send frames directly to. It turns out that my machine did not actually need to communicate with these others in the past, but these broadcast messages that went out, it didn't ignore them completely. Like this machine learned information here if it didn't already know where 155.98.68.1 was. Now it has learned along the way. It turns out that my machine hasn't needed to directly communicate with all these other machines, but it watched ARP packets go by and just remembered the information on the side in case it became useful later.